Hey, welcome back to the Group Project Podcast. This is episode number 98. I can't believe we're almost to 100 here, but we have a very special guest. If you have been in Iowa, an Iowa administrator, Iowa school leader, anytime in the last several, decade here, you've heard this name before. His name is Dr. Roark Horn. Dr. Horn is the executive director of SAI, which is the School Administrators of Iowa, a post he's held since 2015. So, Dr. Horn, Roark, do you care if I call you Roark in this? Is that
Please
okay?
Yeah, please.
Well, thanks for joining us, man. I've been looking forward to this. We set this up a couple months ago. I'm just excited to have you here to learn from you for the next 45 minutes and hear you share some of your experiences. So welcome, man.
Yeah, thanks, Jared. I really appreciate the opportunity and appreciate all the work that you're doing with school leaders not only in Iowa but around the country. So just really honored and humbled and grateful to have this opportunity.
Well, it's just been a cool opportunity to connect with people like you to kind of learn, hey, tell us about your experiences. Tell us some of the ups and downs. Tell us about some things you learned. I feel like and people who listen always come away with a couple great takeaways they can implement in their own either philosophy or their own, daily routine. So, hey, I always start off with a question. Share your educational experience and leadership background. I guess it's more of a statement than a question, but why don't you go ahead and share those things? You've had a really unique path to your current position.
Yeah, thanks. It's been a journey. I started out as a teacher in Jessup, Iowa, way back in 1982. So this is my fourth decade in the business. Teacher coach, really enjoyed that. That's really, Jared, pretty much all I planned to do with my life. But then school leadership came calling. So in my 17th year, I was able to become a building administrator in the same building in which I taught. And so I was able to do that for a few years. I knew pretty early on that once I decided to go into school leadership, I really wanted to go into executive leadership. So being a principal was somewhat of a means to an end to me. So I spent 8 years as a superintendent in a couple of different districts here in Iowa. And then we have regional service agencies in Iowa called AEAs, area education agencies. I had the chance to be the chief administrator at one of those. And then statewide, school administrators of Iowa job came calling and was fortunate enough to get that and been here for the last 7 years. So I went from classroom to building to small school superintendency to bigger school superintendency to regional administrator and now statewide. So not doing anything on the federal level. I just want to be clear about that. This is where it stops.
Now, one of the reasons I brought you on is you just announced your retirement at the end of this year. So, let's back up. That moving to Des Moines and working for SAI, like how did all, so it sound, what were the thoughts that went through your mind, leading this unique agency, this unique post that really assists all the school administrators across Iowa. So kind of take us back to that thought process. How did you decide you wanted to take that role?
Well, I'd served as the president of the organization. You get voted in by your peers, statewide peers, to do that. So I'd gone through the vice president, president-elect, president, past president rotation. And the year after I finished my year as past president is when the job came open. And that also happened to be a time when I could retire with benefits in the state and move into a nonprofit job. So part of it was the timing. When I interviewed for the job, because I really enjoyed the job I was doing and would have stayed doing that for a few more years. But when I interviewed for the job here, I said, in my mind, being served by this agency out in the state, at least 2 hours away with every job I had, I felt there were two things that we really needed to focus on. So it's a great organization already, but I think there's two things that we could do to improve it. So my vision was we need some kind of actionable wellness program for school leaders, because if not us, who? I just saw too many school leaders that I got to work with on a regional basis who would take the job and just immediately their health would, be compromised to the point where they maybe weren't able to do the job because of that. So that was a passion of mine. The other part of it was I wanted to push out our professional learning out across the state and find some way to do that so that people didn't have to come to us, so that we could go out to them. So like what you're doing with the articles and the podcasts and those kinds of things, that was part of my vision 7 years ago, is we need to be doing that. So that's how it came about. I interviewed, I was fortunate enough to get it, and been even more fortunate to hang on to it for the last 7 years.
So talk about some of the skill, that's such a unique position in that role. I mean, there's really no other position like it in our state. What were some of the parallels from being in the superintendent role? And then maybe what were some of the new skills you had to learn being in that position?
I think having been a superintendent and then a regional service director, having had experience is one thing I think that's really important, because then I can relate when people call in and need help. I can, I don't say, well, I've been there, this is what you should do. I never do that. But at least I can, say, well, I've been there, what do you think you should do? And then can maybe help counsel them and advise. So that's really a big part of the job. As far as skills go, I was glad that I got a chance to work in an area education agency, because when I started that job, I mean, that immediately went from being able to kind of run your own district, not unilaterally, as a team, but you get to make you got to have input in almost all the decisions. When you come to a regional service agency, then it's really all about service. So my customers, my stakeholders at that point, were my school administrators and the teachers and the parents and the kids that I serve. So you give up some control, but in a wonderful way, as long as you approach it from that direction. So coming here, kind of the same thing. Our decision making, I get to do some of it as the executive director, but a lot of it is done by the team here, and then also by our different boards. And so what we do is get to present, here are some different options. What do you think we should do? What do you think we should help other people do? So I really like that aspect of it, the service aspect of it.
One thing I've noticed about you that you're really, really good at is just, you seem to know a lot about there's how many 100 districts in the state. I feel like when you come and meet with me, and you've done a good job of reaching out, and COVID's kind of thrown a little bit of a loop in that, but I feel like you know so much about different districts. And is there any tricks? How do you do that? How do you know like so much? Is it just you spend a lot of time remember? Just share, because I think a lot of people wonder that, like, how does he know so much about our districts, our roles, the movement, and that sort of thing? So share your expertise here, man. How do you do it?
Well, I think part of that's having relationships. When you got the superintendent job, before you took it, you reached out to me and said, hey, can we have lunch or whatever? So I came down, we had lunch. So we established a relationship. And then I'd served your district, not too long before that from an AA perspective. So that's one way to be able to do that. So I think the building relationships part of it. I also see it as my job. If we don't sit here and wait for people to call in. So if there's a problem or an issue, I think it's important to reach out and say, hey, is there something that we can do to help? We have all these services available to you. And so you can't do that unless you have your kind of finger on the pulse of what's going on. And I lean a lot on the team here, because it's not just me, it's our communications director, Tracy, daily will come and say, hey, I think she stays up all night, but these are the 4 or 5 things going on in the state, that you should tend to. So it's really a team effort, and it's something that we see as part of our service to the state.
So we talked a lot about your recent experiences. You're working at SAI there, working for the AEA. Let's go way back. Let's go way back to, I forget, your first administrative job was in Jessup. Is that correct?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So take us way back, because we see Roark, like you mentioned, a lot of people call you for advice. They say, hey, Roark, what should we do in this situation? You're definitely a mentor for a lot of leaders. Let's go back to your early years. Reflect on those first few years in administration. What did you have right? And right off the bat, and then what were some of your biggest struggles?
Yeah, well, thank you for that. I appreciate the kind words. So I think the intangible stuff, the stuff you can't teach, is probably what I had right, from the beginning. So the empathy, the heart, the desire to want to, help and serve other people, to be a part of it, to, help others make good decisions, to make good decisions for on a district basis. I think I had all those things, pinned down pretty well. So then it's just a matter of getting experience. What I had wrong, I think, kind of right from the beginning was, I guess, Jared, I felt everybody approached education with the same desire and passion that I did. Always wanting to get better, never teaching the same thing the same way, in two different, in consecutive cycles, caring about kids, those kinds of things. And that would have been the lounge talk. Everybody kind of talked like that. But on, July 1st, I went from one of the gang to the boss. And then from that position, I found out that not everybody had the passion or the desire to try to get better at their work. So that was a blow kind of right from the beginning. It shook me big time. But then, of course, you recognize pretty quickly, well, now that's my job, is to either find a way for them to instill passion in their work, or find some way for them to find alternate work so that I could get somebody in there to work with these kids who has the passion. So that was where I struggled a little bit, because I just finding that out. And of course, for me, it was my peers, and people who had I'd been very close to, and people who had influenced me, early on as a teacher and so on. So a lot of self-reflection at that point, and a lot of just surrounding myself with, people like you and I. You and I now, you fill the same role with people as far as counselor and advisor, somebody people look up to, and want some help sorting out their problems. So we had those people as well when we were getting started, and I leaned on those people a lot as well too.
So this show, we've got a lot of aspiring leaders, we've got current leaders, we've got principals, superintendents, assistant principals, a lot of, audience is wide ranging. I always like asking the question about professional practice. What is one professional practice that you picked up either as a principal or a superintendent that you would highly recommend leaders in the field start doing?
Yeah, for me, I had to learn this, pretty much right away, because the job can be so overwhelming. And so I would say probably within the first 4 months of becoming a principal, I really had to do some self-reflection, because the job was eating me up. And fortunately, by that time, my wife and I had been married for 20 years. We had, 3 kids, and we just kind of sat down and said, is this who you want to be? Are you going to be married to me? Or are you going to be married to your work? Are you going to be a father to the kids? And that was and my wife will do this, which I appreciate and I need, but that was right between the eyes. What is it that you want to have happen? And so for me, for professional practice, I think that conversation now, 2.5 decades ago, has always kind of driven it for me. So I'll work, whatever the job asks for, and whatever I think I should be doing on a daily basis, I'm glad to do that. But when I drive home, I'm clearing my head, and I'm, husband is job 1A and or one, and father is, 1A, and that's who I wanted to be. So for me, it was learning pretty quickly that, work was there, and fortunately, I found meaningful and purposeful work, but work has its place in the scope of what I wanted my life to be. So I think that's helped with the longevity, to be able to stay in it for this length of time. I was never going to burn myself out or anything like that, and just making sure that I always had the perspective of life that I wanted to have. So I would just recommend people be able to look back, at the end of their time, kind of like I am, and say, I kept that sacred. That was what was important to me.
So at the end of this year will be 7 years as the SAI executive director. What are one or two of your biggest takeaways from these last 7 years?
Well, one thing I'm just really excited about is the level of leaders that are being trained to come into the profession, and have come into the profession, and just how excited I am about, leadership going forward in the next generation. I look at you, I look at, I could point to so many school leaders out there who come into it so much more prepared than I was, to be successful in leadership, so much more willing to be vulnerable, to ask for help, to be well prepared, to be skilled. That's something that I've seen really just in the last 7 years. And I think about all the things that you guys have done and overcome, trial by fire for, many people, especially who are just starting during the pandemic. And I think about once we get beyond the pandemic, how all those skills are going to be able to help our kids going forward. So I'm excited about that. I think that just maybe just one other thing is I've come to realize when we're in the education business, we think everybody it minimally appreciates the work that we're doing in education because we surround ourselves with educators, and yeah, we have our problems and issues, but for the most part we feel valued and that we're doing good work and it's really important and significant. But there's a part that talked about this last week with the group. We also need to recognize that there's a portion of people out there that really, for whatever reason, want to see education not succeed. And you can spend time thinking about, well, what's their motivation on that, and how do we change their minds? And I guess I would encourage anybody listening to this that don't spend any time on that. That's not going to happen. Spend all your time on doing what you're doing and creating conditions that irritate those folks, because I think that that's what we do in the best way to honor our kids. So it's hard for me to relate to that, but you asked the 7-year question. That's one thing that, coming out to the state now and looking at the whole thing, that it's disturbing on the one hand, but we just continually rise to the occasion, and we'll continue to do that.
So you gave me a great segue to a question I had a little bit further down the list. So you said a lot of new leaders are coming in very well prepared for the position. What do you see as the biggest challenge to school leaders here in the next coming years, the next 10 years?
Well, I think I'll loop back to that. I think the people who don't particularly care for education have become emboldened. I think education has become somewhat of a battleground for a lot of society's problems. Why? Again, not going to spend a lot of time thinking about that because it is what it is, right? And so I think that that's a challenge that they're going to face going forward. But this is what I'm excited about. So we had education the way that it was done pre-pandemic. Let's call it traditional. We have all the changes that you folks did during the pandemic. What I'm excited about is, can we take the best parts of the traditional and the best parts of what we've done during the pandemic and move education forward for our kids? That's what I'm excited to see. I'm sad that I won't be a player in that going forward, but I'm excited about the level of talent of people that we have that are going to make that happen. I'm going to love coming into South Tama 2 years from now. We're not worried about masking, vaccines, contact tracing, none of that kind of stuff. And you're going to have every individual kid, being able to be educated at whatever, in whatever format works best for that individual child. So some will be traditional, some will be the hybrid opportunities that you've offered, some will be totally online, but we will evolve in a way that I would have liked to have seen happen 25 years ago. Now we will. So that's my answer.
So I knew if you didn't go there, I knew I was either you might go to some sort of education evolving, getting through the pandemic. Another big thing right now, which you have spoken about at length, is teacher and staff shortage. Mm-hmm. So, I guess my question to you is, I might ask a follow-up question or two, but my question to you is, what advice do you have for school leaders who are dealing with this teacher or staff shortage?
Simply put, Jared, I just make your district a destination district. I would look at what you're doing and I would copy it. So that's my advice to everybody. We're going to be somewhat in competition for teachers, especially early on in their career when they're more mobile. We're going to be somewhat in competition for associates and all the different levels of people who work in our districts. And when you're in competition, then you obviously want to put your, best foot forward. So I've been talking about this for several years because, you and I, our profession has been talking about the teacher shortage. What are you doing as a district, to prepare yourself for this possibility so that, you're attractive to people? So I think that that's one thing. I think the other thing is, as educators, especially as educational leaders, we can talk about the profession in a more attractive way. We have to understand that other people are going to down talk the profession, but we found such value in the profession, and other educators find such value in the profession. So how do we help, our kids take a look at this and think about, well, that's something I'd really like to do. That's how I got into it. That's all I ever wanted to do, was be a teacher, and then later on a school leader. So how do we create those conditions? I think is probably the condition is the next question going forward. But let's make the profession attractive with whatever that looks like. The gift of time for our leaders. I know you and your board have worked, recently to be able to provide some opportunities for your teachers. Just that little Wednesday break or whatever you're giving them, once a month or something like that. When you're a teacher, you that's what you look forward to. It's just it's time. It's more important than anything else. So I think when people do look at that, then that makes the job much more attractive.
So you have the opportunity, I mentioned earlier, to really work with all administrators across the state of Iowa, and there's a lot of them. What is one mistake you see the most from inexperienced school leaders? If you could maybe pinpoint one or maybe two things, what would that be?
Yeah, I think anybody coming in new to a situation, well, now I'm the leader, so it's about me, and I have to do this and I have to solve these problems and so on. I think it's a mistake to think that the district just kind of winked on when you got there and it's going to wink off when you leave. That's not true. There's this whole history of the district. So we always tell new administrators, you have two things that you need to do. You need to learn the job, and hopefully you're in an environment where the district is investing in you doing that, and you need to build relationships. Those are the two big things. So getting in and trying to fix and solve problems at the beginning is a mistake. And the problem is people are compelled to do that. We tell people during our new administrative institutes, there will be a line of people at your door who want you to do whatever they didn't get from your predecessor. So that's fire the football coach, or that's I don't like my kid's schedule, or whatever. And so we train people to talk, to kind of think through that and make sure that they get their eyeballs on things before they ever start doing that. And I think I'll just add one more thing to it. I think this is a cousin of what I just talked about. And that's, I think it's really important to take the I out of the decision-making as much as you can. So especially when you're new, but this, I think you grizzled vets, will also get value out of this. I think if the first thing through your mind is, how am I going to do this? That's faulty thinking from a leadership. I think the first question ought to be, who's the best person positioned to do this? And for me, a lot of this isn't false modesty. A lot of times that wasn't me. So I think it's important as a beginning leader, especially, but even as a veteran, you can get some value out of that. Just thinking about, well, who is the best person? And then I'll take that one level further. Then sometimes we're reluctant to ask other people for help, right? Well, they're busy too. Well, that's faulty thinking as well, too. So, Jared, you asked me to be part of this podcast. The first thing that went through my mind was not, I'm too busy. The first thing that went through my mind is, I get to be number 98, right? So, and if I ask you to do something, which I have in the past too, as busy as you are with all the things that you're doing, really? Really? I mean, you want me? Out of all these superintendents, you chose me? Yes, I want to go about doing that.
Yep.
So we don't give that gift to people very often. So I think that's something for your vets to think about as well too.
I do these conversations all the time, and we always talk about building relationships early in the ball game with whatever role you've taken. I come back to professional practice. If you are going back into a principal role or back into a superintendent role, what is like a specific professional practice you think you would do to build those relationships?
Well, I do what you did. I do what we talked about at the restaurant, almost 5 years ago now. And that's, I would invite as many people in who are willing to come in and just ask them three questions. What are we doing well? What do we need to work on? What are your ideas for number two? It's really that simple. I would never force somebody to come in. I would never schedule them in because it may take for a while for them to build up a comfort level with you. They may send their peers out, to do a little scouting mission. Okay, oh, well, okay, with Jared, then all right, I guess I feel more comfortable going or whatever. But that's what I would do, is just be invitational, but not force that invitation. And then you get a lot of information, doing that kind of right from the start.
I'm going to dig a little bit deeper. Those three questions, what would, and I don't think there's a right or wrong answer here, but what would you do anything specific with those responses, or what would you do? Or would you just be listening?
Listening is obviously the most important part of it. It really kind of depends. So if you got, say, one of my first jobs, outside of the district I was in for 20 years, probably 12 out of the first 14 people came to me and said they just didn't have access to the building on weekends. That the previous person ahead of me had restricted that for some reason. So you got 12 out of 14 people telling you that. You go, well, this is something we can address right away. I'm not telling you got to be in the building, but boy, if you want to come in and do work, or play in the gym with your kids or whatever, I got no problem with that. A teacher in the building, nothing bad can happen as a result of that, right? So it kind of depends. But I guess what I do is kind of what you did and what we talked about in the past. I'd look for patterns. I'd look for themes. I'd want to talk to a minimum of 20 people before I jumped on anything at all. But if you got a bunch of people telling you something and it's an easy fix like that, that's just a quick win.
Okay. So let's go. We talked about like maybe some mistakes of inexperienced school leaders. Let's go on the opposite end now. What do you feel like separates like the good school leaders from or I guess I'd reverse that. What separates the great school leaders from the good school leaders?
Well, some of the things that we've already talked about, not feeling like you have all the answers, being collaborative. Um, I, I find this one to be interesting. So if you asked me to write a reference for you, Jared, this is one of the things I would say. I have no idea what Jared's leadership style is. And I offer that as a compliment, because this is what I see Jared doing. If the situation calls for a decisive top down, then he does that. If the situation calls for collaboration, input from a bunch of different folks, he does that. If the situation calls for him to step back and let somebody else lead, he does that. So I don't know how to characterize him except to say, whatever situation occurs, he knows how to apply a leadership style to that situation to be effective. So I would use that as an answer to the question. I think that's what separates, the really great ones from the ones who are good.
Okay, man. Hey, last question before we hit some more quick hitters here. You're retiring at the end of this year. You've got everything in front of you here. What big plans do you have? Is there anything that you're looking forward to, or just share your thoughts there?
Yeah, I'm staying pretty open right now. I don't really want to continue to work full time. That's the reason for retiring. But some kind of part-time work, I think I'd be pretty interested in. My dad had a lot of health problems by the time he turned my age. He had macular, so he was pretty much blind. Had his first of several heart attacks. He had colon cancer, and he lived for another 30 years. So I mean, he got through all that except for being able to see. So I've just always kind of planned that by the time I hit my early 60s, I'd be retiring, because I would be falling apart, just like he did. So fortunate, my genes must have came from my mom's side. So I think things are, going pretty well health-wise. So even though I'm ready to step back for some full-time work, then part-time work in the education field somewhere would be pretty intriguing to me. But I want to make sure that my number one thing is to make sure the transition goes smoothly for the organization and for the people we serve.
So let's talk about, is the position still taking applications then? Is that, you're nodding your head yes? Is that?
Yeah, well, no, the applications are completed. They're down to semifinalists.
Okay.
Those people will be narrowed down further on the 15th. I'm not sure when the podcast is going to air. And then the three finalists probably will come in and interview here in person in the office, and that's on the 20th. So hopefully by
Wow.
the break, we'll know.
Okay. Hey guys. Hey, and we're going to air this probably late this week, early next week. So, hey,
Okay.
by the time this is out, we may be very close to finding out who Roark's successor is there. So this would be exciting. This is a big position. I mean, this is a high profile position. Everybody knows you. Everybody knows your office. You guys throw on, a huge, awesome event in the summer with the state conference, and it's a big deal. So I'm looking forward to seeing how that all unfolds there. So, hey, this is episode number 98. I'm with Dr. Roark Horn, the SAI Executive Director. He has shared some really, really cool ideas. Man, I've been loving just some of the feedbacks. I mean, you can't see me on this end on the video, but I'm nodding my head yes, like at a lot of things that he's saying, because I completely
He's nodding his head. I think that may be tiredness. I don't. Is that?
No,
okay.
no. It's an
Okay.
enthusiastic. It's an enthusiastic.
Okay.
Yes, I agree. Yes, I would be saying the same thing. So, this is where we transition to kind of some quick hitters, have a little bit of fun, to kind of dig into some specifics. So, Roark, you live not just close to your office, you live like a block away from work. I just realized that before.
Yeah.
So I do the same thing.
Yeah.
Tell us, like, and you said you love it. And I know I'm going way off script, but I am a believer in living close to your work. What do you like so much about it?
Yeah, we've always done that if we possibly can. I like, just being able to go home at lunch, maybe blow off a little steam if needed,
Yes.
play with the dog, or tell my wife, hey, you'd never believe it, this happened or whatever. But that's always helpful. I could walk to work. I don't, but I could. So that's when we have bad weather days, we can keep the office open because I can get here, take care of the phones or any incoming that happens. So I like that aspect of it. When my wife and I do our weekend walks, then we walk by the office so I can, check mail. And so it's just the convenience of not having to have everything really prepared, knowing that I could run home and grab something if I need to.
Yep. I used to always live a ways away from work. I just happened here in Tama where I live. The place is very close. I love it. And I think I've totally changed my mindset towards living close to work because it is very nice. Okay, man, I'm going to put you on the spot here. I usually give people the easy way out on this question. I want to pinpoint Roark's favorite one or two restaurants in the Des Moines area. I want to pinpoint this, okay? Because a lot of times I get it. People in small districts, they feel like they can't just single one out over the other. But I want to hear it, Roark. Top one or two restaurants in Des Moines for you.
Okay, well, for the most part, I'm a simple guy. So they have tasty tacos. There's like 5 or 6 of those throughout the metro area. Best tacos in the country. So I'll do a plug for them. Yeah, we're big Mexican fans of Mexican food. So that's one.
Hard shell, soft shell.
They're floured tortillas that are deep fried. It's amazing. Yeah, it's just amazing. And the meat and the cheese and the sauce, and I'm getting hungry. For formal dining, there's a little dive out in Beaverdale called Simon's. That's where we like to go for our anniversary. They don't take reservations, so sometimes you got to stand in line, but best onion rings. And, if you're into more, formal food, they have Italian and steaks and everything that's really good. And then you got OP Pizza, which I know there's those all across the state, but right up the road here within walking distance. So those kind of be my top 3, the cheap food, the bar food, and then the formal dining.
So Tasty Tacos, Simon's, and OP Pizza.
Yep.
There you go. Ladies and gentlemen, you got a whole weekend plan right there.
That's right.
Okay, what is this? Sometimes people don't understand this question. I'm going to try to explain this as best I can. What is one sneaky good purchase, like a really cool purchase that you're proud of, that you like to tell their people like, hey, you need to buy this? What would that one thing be?
I was never, you do so well with the fitness and that kind of stuff. I always was a runner and I always played sports and that kind of stuff, but I was never a believer in a fitness watch, like a Polar or a Apple Watch or anything like that. And then when we started our wellness program here at SAI, our director refused to do the program unless I got involved in it. So that you need friends like that, who will do that. That's been a lifesaver for me. So I would say first buying the Polar device, and now I wouldn't do anything without having that kind of monitor. And now I've switched over to an Apple Watch. So the data really intrigues me. It motivates me. I want to get my workouts in. I want to get my steps in. I want to get my sleep in. I want to get my nutrition in. And when you get to this age, those things really, add up and make a difference.
So you mentioned the director. I'm sure you're talking about Dana. Is that correct?
Well, Dana she takes care of the theoretical, philosophical piece, so
Yeah.
talking to us about that. We actually have, wellness programming that,
Sure.
school administrators for free can take advantage of. And we have hundreds of our administrative teams take advantage of, and they can do competitions
Sure.
but
Yep.
it's focused on nutrition, sleep, hydration, and exercise. And what we started that, again, I told you when I first got here, that was a driving force for wanting the job. So you got to put up or shut up, right? I was lucky enough to hire a good friend of mine who had been the state and the national PE teacher of the year, who was retiring out of Grundy Center, Iowa. And then he came and started our programming, and the program has just evolved every year. So so Dana does you need to think about this. This is what you need to be doing. And then we come right in with oh, you don't have a program? Well, we got one of those too.
Sure. So I was going to tell the audience, we did interview Dana, a lot of the same ideas you're hearing, especially with some of this life fit balance, back on episode number 32, way back on episode 32. So check that out. Dana also gave a great interview. Roark, what is one book that has greatly influenced your life?
Well, nobody else will have said this book, so I'm going to give your audience something different to think about. But the book that was the greatest influence in my life is a book called Ball 4, and it was written by nobody would have thought of that, right? So I read this book when I was 11, and it was by an author named Jim Bouton, and Jim was a relief pitcher for the Seattle Pilots, who were a major league team for about 1 or 2 years. And what he did is he wrote kind of a day-to-day diary of the season and all the kind of ups and downs of being a relief pitcher. But what really intrigued me about the book was in almost every entry, there's just a laugh out loud moment, especially if you're an 11-year-old boy. So for me, the value of humor and how you can put humor even into challenging situations to ease the tension and put things in perspective. That's a book that really had influence on me. So I want to make sure I had something that nobody else probably had ever thought of, but that's the importance of humor. That's helped me through, all these years of my life.
Cool. Okay. Ball 4 by Jim Bouton, right?
Bouton.
Yeah. Okay. I'm looking. Hey, this is a pretty, I'm kind of reading through the Google Books preview. Pretty advanced book for 11 years old, man. You're gifted and talented there, tag kid, huh?
Well, I love reading. I love baseball. So my parents encouraged us to read, as at whatever level we thought we could. So.
This is fun. I'm just reading some of this. It was written in late 60s, early 70s. So some of the things he's talking about are just real fast. I'm just real fascinating as I'm scrolling here. So very cool. You're right. 90 plus guests, never heard Ball 4 mentioned on the show. We've heard a lot of Jim Collins. We've heard a lot of Brene Brown. We've heard a lot of Simon Sinek. Jim Bouton, first time. Okay. Next question. Okay, are you now you live in Des Moines, so you've got your options there for gas stations. The
Mhm.
people I've talked to in Des Moines, which has been a handful of you guys, you've got Casey's, you've got Quick Star, you've got QT, you've got Hy-Vee,
Yeah.
whatever you want to call it, gas station.
Right.
Where's Rourke going for if he has to pick one place for a gas station convenience store, where's he going?
Well, probably right around the corner. There's a Hy-Vee Express. So when you do Hy-Vee Fuel Saver, that's the frugal nature of me. Then
Okay.
that's kind of where I tend to go. So,
So
but if I'm
Rourke,
out and about driving, then usually it's Casey's because they have the cleanest bathrooms. Yeah,
ooh, ooh.
that is an important thing when you're this age.
Now, hey, I was gonna agree with you, but I did go on a road trip a couple months ago. I don't even know where I was at. I'm going way off topic here. I was going to Wisconsin and encountered a very dirty Casey's bathroom.
Oh,
Very disturbed, very unlike them. But I agree with what you're saying. Okay, so let's go with your Hy-Vee Express. And you're starving. You're going on a road trip. You and your wife, you're starving. You get 3 items. You pick any 3 items you want in Hy-Vee Express. What are you going to grab?
oh, I'm going to grab a sub to start with. I'm going to grab a bag of chips. I'm going to grab an iced tea.
Okay, so you got to get a little more specific here.
Oh,
So
Italian.
I mean, you're a sub and chips. Help us out here. You going a cold cut trio? You going? Where you
Yep.
going?
No, Italian sub because you got to have the salami and the pepperoni, especially if you're going on a trip with your wife. These are things that you can only do if you've been married for a long time. And then honey barbecue.
Okay. Yeah, nice. All right, good selections there. Okay, next question. Oh, this kind of gets serious for a second. Everybody knows Roark. I mean, it seems like you've been highly successful. You've gotten every job you've wanted. You've went from superintendent to AA chief to SAI. Did Roark Horn ever not get a job he applied for?
Yeah, I did. You got time for just a little story on this one?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. All right. So I did. So when I was a superintendent at one of the small schools, I was encouraged to apply for a superintendency in a fairly large school in the state. And as soon as I put the stuff in the mail, I knew it was the wrong thing. But I knew some people in that large district and some people would encourage me to apply. So when the recruiter called me and said, hey, can I come over and visit with you? I'm like, well, sure. But I knew that it wasn't going to work. So this was a recruiter who I knew who had been very kind to my wife, who, when she didn't get a job in that particular district, and I've always, admired this person and so on. So when he came over to visit with me about the job, I asked, you want a cup of coffee? He said, yeah. We sat in my office in this small district, and I said, you're okay if I start? And he goes, well, yeah, okay, go ahead. And I said, yeah, you can't hire me. And he's like, oh, thank God. I had no idea how I was going to tell you this. We have this relationship, but man, you're punching way above your pay grade here. And I said, yeah. I said, here's your real problem. You can't interview me. And he's like, why? What do you mean? I said, because I'm going to nail that interview and you still can't hire me. That's the problem you're going to have. So he's like, okay, are you recusing then? And I said, yep, I'm out. And that was the end of it. So
Wow.
yeah, so that was fun. Yeah.
Oh gosh. Okay. So I usually ask, like, what did you learn from that experience? I mean, what do you feel like you learned from that experience, or do you feel like you made the right call? For not going out, or what other reflections do you have on that
Yeah,
experience?
so thank you for the follow-up question, because that's an important one. I learned to not get talked into anything. Like I said, as soon as I put the stuff in the mail, I knew that I didn't want that job, frankly. And so then it's, well, why did I apply for it if I didn't want it? I didn't want to move my kids at that particular time. I loved the job that I was doing. It was the right thing and the right fit. I mean, why did I apply? Well, I applied because other people saw me doing that job. And so I applied to appease them. And so that's what I learned is don't ever do that again. And
Okay.
I do get to apply that to this job when people call about job openings. That's one of the things I try to get them to is that, is it because you see yourself here, or is it because other people see you here? because those are two very different things.
Good advice. Love
Thanks.
that. Productivity. You seem like a very productive person. Like you're it just seems like you're always on the go. You're involved in different things. You're at different conferences. You're giving speeches. You're writing, your articles for your monthly newsletter. What's your best tip for being productive?
Yeah, well, thank you for that. That's what I want people to think anyway. So you got to give the impression that that's what you're doing. I think focus is. I'd use the F word there. I think you really have to stay focused on what it is that you want to do and what it is that you accomplish. And I know that isn't always possible for leaders because you could be focused on something, but now you get pulled away on something else. But the ability to prioritize and say, this is something that I really need to concentrate on, and then clearing the time, to be able to do that as best as you possibly can. I think you get to do that more in executive leadership than you do as a principal. But if it's important enough to do, then it's important enough to do well, and it's important enough for you to give your time and attention to it. So if I know I won't be able to give my full time and attention to it, then I feel pretty comfortable then just saying no, and then here's why.
Mm-hmm. What is one big goal you are currently working on?
Well, the transition. I think I'll go back to that. I think I really want to make sure that whoever comes in has both a smooth path and a bumpy one. And let me explain that just a little bit. I know when I was transitioning in, Dan Smith's kind of my all-time hero, my big brother, and just an amazing person, and had an amazing influence on me and my life, and continues to do that for this day. When we were talking about the transition, he gave me kind of this list of things that he wanted to get done before I got here. And I can remember we were sitting in this office. I can remember looking at him and saying, "So Dan, if you do all that stuff, what am I going to do?" And he got this look on his face like, that's a really good point, So that's where I want, for the next person, my goal for the next person is just to be able to, have that smooth transition, build relationships, learn the job, because it's going to be far different than anything that they ever did. But then also be able to have some things at the beginning that they can get their hands around and put their stamp on, to be able to move, the state leadership forward.
Awesome. Very cool. Very cool. Hey man, that's all my questions there. Is there anything we didn't talk about that you want to make sure we covered?
Well, if you'll take a compliment, I just want to applaud you and the work that you do. I think this is so important. From our personal relationship, I support, everything that you're doing. There's no end to what we need to do as far as helping and supporting leaders. And the more that we can do, the better off we can be. So I love the articles. I'm most of the way through the book.
Oh, good.
Yeah. And you caused me to think. So sometimes I'm like, hey, we're in lockstep on this one. And sometimes I think, I got to pull up the phone and kick him in the knee. I think he's wrong on this one, So I haven't done that yet, but I'm going to wait till I get through the whole book.
Oh,
but that's just what you're doing. And I'm sorry you're scraping the bottom of the barrel here on podcast 98. Hopefully you'll regroup after this. But all that work I think is so important. So I wanted to end with that and ask you to take a compliment and recognize, what you're doing out here for all of us.
Well, I really appreciate that. It's really just, it's an hour a week, having these conversations. I feel like I'm always either learning something new or confirming things that I think. That sometimes it helps hearing that from somebody else saying, yep, you're doing the right thing. So I appreciate that. It's been fun to connect, fun to listen. And I got it. It's just crazy. You're referring to our conversation 4 or 5 years ago prior to me, just the fact that you invested that time in me makes it super easy for me to reach out back to you and to ask you questions and to learn from you. So likewise, I appreciate the time and everything that you've done. And I think think I speak for many, many people in the state when I say, what an awesome career you've had, an impact you've made on so many of us. I think with you talking about Dan Smith, I think a lot of us could say the same thing about you with conversations they've had with you, with advice you've been given, that sort of thing. So I really appreciate it. And it's been great having you here. I always finish with, if they want to connect with you, I feel like this is a pretty rhetorical question. People are pretty good with email and Google searching, but what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Yeah, probably email, call. I have to tell my kids that every once in a while. These things actually, you can talk to each other. It's the greatest invention ever.
Yeah.
Text. My cell phone number is 515-835-7155. I think it's important for people to remember that you honor me when you call. And sometimes people, the first thing that they do is they're like, hey, I know you're busy, bud. It's like, well, yeah, we're all busy. But the fact that you reached out to me, because you want help with this, I'm honored. So I approach every conversation with just a high level of gratitude that, somebody cares enough and thinks that I might be helpful. That's just very flattering.
Well, cool. Hey, 98 episodes. I think you're the first person to drop their personal cell phone on here. So I told you guys, relationships, man, this guy's all about it. He knows everybody. He knows everything that's going on, and it's really cool. So Dr. Horn, thank you so much. Appreciate it. I kept you a little bit longer tonight. I know you're going to go out and get some tasty tacos, and you're going to stop and get that iced tea at Hy-Vee there on your way out. So
absolutely.
All right.
Thank you so much. I'm honored. I appreciate the opportunity to give back a little bit. So thank you, my friend.
All right, man. Hey, have a good night, and we'll be in touch. All right.
Okay. Sounds good. Thanks, Trey.